Hey everyone, it's Kyle with Inshore Edge. Today's video is going to be tackle related, going over gear, specifically rods and reels. And not just any rods and reels. These are bigger, heavier rods, reels for bigger lures. And the reason I'm throwing bigger lures is because I've discovered big trout. And that learning curve is taking a big curve upwards just in the past few months. Through throwing big lures, I've been able to kind of discover much better upper class trout, right? And wherever you live in whichever state, that has different definitions. But here in Mississippi, I'm starting to find some big trout. I've got that big trout bug. It's hard not to go out and fish for them every time and still bring you all the content that I'd really kind of like to gear this for. A little bit of everything inshore, which I'm definitely going to get back into, but we've just been on them and it's hard to get away from them. So why big lures, right? So we know big trout eat big prey, big species, big mullet species, pogies, things like that. You don't have to search for long online to where you can see filleted trout with just giant bait in their bellies, like usually big mullet, it seems like, or other trout, that kind of thing. So we know that, but culturally inshore, we still throw relatively a lot of small lures. And even our bigger lures are still relatively small comparatively to other big species throughout the world, namely most closely to us, bass fishing for big bass, use much bigger lures. So that's kind of where it all started. And I have a little bit of a bass fishing background. And so just like, why not start throwing for bigger lures for bigger trout? And that idea quickly became like, holy smokes, why aren't we throwing? It's been wildly successful in a really short amount of time. So that's the first part of the why. You also need, if you're going to throw lures that are 1 ounce and higher, up to right now I'm throwing 1 ounce to 2 ounce, you need heavier action rods and bigger reels and bigger line to do that. I've always described it as when you throw a lure that really you're outclassed, you have a rod that's too small or a reel that's too small or a line that's too small for that lure. It feels like the lure's throwing you, not that you are throwing the lure. Really, you just don't have control, and you really need that control. And then also, seems like over half the time I've been catching these bigger trout around really gnarly structure. So like above water reefs with lots of rebar, bridge pilings, boulders, rocks, all kinds of hard structure that in saltwater get a lot of barnacles and growth on them, and they become razor sharp. And so when you get a big trout on, they can use and abuse you if you don't have the right size gear to horse them out of there. It's very different than catching a big trout on a big flat, nothing but sand, and all you gotta do is just play them out. There's truly a different battle when they're near hard structure, and they will try to get you in there and break you off. Just discovered that in this past 3-4 months. I went to war. Murphy's Law hit me right away. I got no second chance. I was throwing about a 1 ounce glide bait on a medium action SLX rod, which they do kind of weight a little bit heavier. I was able to cast that well. Everything was fine as far as control. And it was silly. I should have known better. I did know better, and I just ignored it. And sure enough, second cast up against a big gnarly reef, I look into a 5-6 pound trout. She wallows up on the surface. And of course we get a good look at her when, those that break off, you don't get to, there's no what ifs. You know exactly what you just lost, and it's cruel. But yeah, she abused me. I realized she was going to go beeline to this big bridge piling jutting out perpendicular. I put everything I could. I was willing to pull the hooks if need be. And the butt on that rod just was not enough. And she abused me and broke me off. So never again. But hey, it's a good learning point to share with you guys on why it's important to go with what I'm getting ready to show you. Also, last but not least, it's very important. You're gonna see these lure categories, the majority of them have breakaway rigs, right? So you have the bait, and then you got these treble hooks that break off, break away from the bait. And so when a trout comes up, a lot of times they'll headshot. Big trout love to headshot. A big mullet, for example. They're gonna grab that bait, the treble hooks are gonna hook into their mouth, this with a couple of head shakes very soon into the fight, if not right away. The big bait's gonna come out of their mouth. And then you're gonna have the trout mouth closed with these treble hooks in their mouth. And I found out real quick, it's almost 90% of the fish that we bring in, they don't try to shake those hooks very much. They keep their mouth closed. And if you've any predatory species or any big species that you're fishing for, if their mouth stays closed during that fight, it's a completely different fight. When they've got a mouth full of, you know, whether it's a big topwater or a lot of plastic and hooks, they're constantly shaking. And that shaking hydrodynamically just creates resistance, and it slows them down. They just don't fight as well. A lot of thrashing on the surface, that kind of thing. Don't get me wrong, they have their ways of throwing their hooks there too, but it's just not as strong a fight. These fish are extremely strong. And that's really with all our baits, like even the swim baits, the mag drafts, breakaway, right? And so that's a smaller breakaway rig, but still you'll see this hook will be inside their mouth, and that bait more often than not is outside of their mouth. So that's another reason, especially if you double that up and you're near structure, again, you're dealing with a different trout. Pound for pound, if they have the big old bait in their mouth versus just hooks, they are so much stronger with just hooks. You will see that right away if you start catching on these bigger lures. All right, so that's the why, right? So why I want to go big. All right, so let's get into the categories. I'm going to categorize the rods and reels that I use just based off the categories of lures. I'm only really throwing just a handful of lures right now. There's hundreds of glide baits out there. There's hundreds of swim baits. I'm just throwing a handful right now. I chose these. They've been wildly successful. It's hard to put them down. But I'm also a tackle junkie, and so in the ensuing years, I'm definitely going to be throwing a lot of different kinds of brands as it's fun. It's fun to buy tackle and buy different lures. It plays with our imagination. It's what keeps us like a kid again. So let's start with a 6-inch chop block, all right? So not a big bait, as you can see. I mean, it depends on where you're coming from. If you're throwing a lot of little 3-inch baits inshore, kind of finesse fishing, yeah, it does seem like very big. But I swear, you start catching some just even 20-inch trout on this, you're gonna really, I'm looking at this now where 3 months ago, I was like, man, that's pretty big. Now it's like, gosh, this is small. So it's just your perspective changes. So, but anyhow, it's a 6-inch bait and it's 1 ounce, right? So the Berkley Chop Block 6 inches, 1 ounce. This is the only category that I'm throwing right now where you can throw a medium heavy rod. Everything else is heavier. So a medium heavy and a size 100 bait cast reel. That's your normal size bait cast reel. I'll show you an example. So medium heavies, I'll give you, so first off, a couple of these rods, I'm a little frugal, always have been, right? And even as I've got a little bit more financially secure, I'm looking for deals with rods. And so for most rods, I'm still looking at $100, $150 range, which you can get a lot of great rods with certain brands for that price range. And if I buy anything more expensive than that, it's after I get a really good deal. So with that said, some of these rods are discontinued. All right, so I have a Lew's HM85 here that discontinued probably 10 years ago, but it's a heavy action, moderate fast. So it's got the butt and the first half of the rod that's heavy, and then a kind of pretty flexible tip. I love this for the Berkley Chop Block, especially if I'm fishing around structure. It gives me that heavier action to get the fish out of the structure and just kind of control a big trout better, but it's got the tip to kind of sling a 1 ounce bait. And so this is a flat kind of bait, the Berkley Chop Block. So it's not aerodynamically designed. It's an ounce, so it'll cast. You ain't gonna worry about it. It'll zing it with a good reel and a good rod. You got it matched right. It'll fly. But it's just not weighted like some of our baits where it can cast, the weight transfer system, all that. You can't really put that in there. So you need that medium heavy. I feel like a true heavy action would overpower this Berkley 6-inch chop block. It's just a little too much. And so since this is discontinued, one, I don't have an alternative heavy moderate action rod, but I did go into a local store and I found some readily available brands and their associated models that you could quickly pick up. I handle these rods. I fished with a few of them and are great substitutes, great for the Berkley Chop Block. So let's talk about that real quick. So for the Berkley Chop Block 6-inch, all right, these are all going to be medium heavies. So we've got the Shimano Clarus, C-L-A-R-U-S. Great rod for $109. Great sensitivity, super light. Just those Shimano pushes down a lot of quality into those lower price ranges. It's a 7-foot 3/8 to 3/4 ounce medium heavy fast. That's the only one in that lineup that's a medium heavy fast. Like I said, 7 foot. Fantastic rod for the Berkley Chop Block 6-inch. We've also got a Shimano SLX 7'5" medium heavy. It's rated 1/4 ounce to 3/4 ounce, extra fast. Don't get dismayed. Don't worry about the rating on these. It says 3/4 ounce, but they can handle a Berkley Chop Block 1 ounce very well. And then also the Falcon Buku SR, all right? So another great lineup that's been around for a while. It's a medium heavy, 7'2", 1/8 or 3/8 ounce. I've thrown some of those. My son throws a Falcon Buku medium heavy with a chop block, handles it great. He catches a lot, and that's becoming a problem for another story. You might need to kick him out of the boat. He's catching too many. All right, so that's some alternatives that you can find typically locally for the Berkley Chop Block 6-inch. All right, let's move on to the second category, these 6-inch swim baits, right? Many of them are pre-rigged, like Megabass Mag Draft. Pre-rigged, it's weighted. It's got a harness in there with a weight. It's got this little rig with a single belly treble, all right? Also, you've got Z-Man Swag LT. I've got that with a top hook, but it also comes with a belly treble. Also, 6 inches, 1.25 ounce. It's a category that many of these manufacturers are just kind of putting their own twist on it, but typically the specs are 6 inches, 1 to 1.25 ounce. And then also got a Bass Mafia Dangerous, and this is not pre-rigged, but I use these for big extra wide gaps, and I'll talk about that in a second. All right, so these, they're not much heavier, 1/4 ounce than the Berkley Chop Block, but it just seems like they probably are. I haven't put them on the scale, but a heavy action rod, in my opinion, is best suited. I've been throwing them a lot, caught a lot of big trout on them. The control, I like that heavy action to control. These things will cast far. Control around, like you've seen my videos, I parallel these rocks. And so I would need to make accurate casts and try to make an accurate cast to bring that lure as close as possible to the rocks into that strike zone where these trout like to hang. And so control is important, and a heavy action delivers that with these. And then also, even though it is a breakaway, sometimes these will have line through belly trebles in them, or they're a breakaway. So again, more often than not, 90% of the time I would say, the bait ends up being out of the fish's mouth, but it's a single big treble. And so I know when we think of trebles and top waters and all those other things, we think of hooks pulling a lot with treble hooks. Not so much when you get a single big treble in their mouth, they close their mouth. Generally, it's got them pinned really well. And so you can get away with a heavy action rod. It's not too heavy. It's not going to pull that hook out of their mouth, especially when their mouths are closed, right? Just like talked about how they fight so much stronger. And then I just mentioned it, that wide gap, all right? So I use this, and I won't go into too much details. We'll talk about this in another video. With these unrigged 6-inch plastics, that is an 8/0 owner beast hook. So extra wide gap. And this is a 3/8 ounce. I like to throw this up in the rocks and make contact with the rocks because it's weedless. Make contact with the rocks, and it's a new bite. I got a video coming soon where we've caught some really good trout, and it's that contact getting up in there that's really setting these trout off. They're obviously seeing it, they see it deflect off, and they smoke it. Not a new technique. It's not a new thing. In the bass world, they do that all the time with crankbaits and chatterbaits, trying to make contact with wood or other structure, and it just creates a phenomenal bite. Sure enough, no different in the trout world. Who knew? So the reason I want only a heavy action though, and I want to put that drag tight on this, is because there's a lot of plastic, and that's a big hook to drive through on that hook set and do that trout's mouth. So they inhale it, you need to boom, you need to just jack them, and you need the weight to do so in that rod, that heavy action rod, to kind of get that hook to penetrate the plastic and then penetrate their mouth. So not an exception, you need heavy if you're going to fish them like that. All right. And that's also in the flats. If you're fishing flats with a lot of grass and you're trying to make them weedless so you don't get grass on there, especially long casts, you need that heavy action rod to really just send everything home, get that slack out of the line, and have that power from a distance to set that hook. All right. So that is the 6-inch swim baits, the other category that's been wildly successful for me. And then we'll move into the Berkley Chop Block 8-inch. All right. So I've admittedly not thrown this as much. I've caught 2 good trout on it, around 4 pounds, and lost a really, really big one. And really, I think it does get less bites, but it seems like when you put it in front of a big trout, it's going to get equally as bit. It's just a lot of smaller fish, like 15 to 18, 19-inch fish won't eat it, whereas they will eat that Berkley 6-inch chop block. But nevertheless, that's it right there. Normal size dude, 8 inches. Also has a little breakaway rig. It's 2-ounce bait, right? So 2-ounce bait, you need bigger rods to throw this, right? So you're not going to get away. A heavy action, can you throw it? Yes, but you're gonna feel like that bait is throwing you. You just don't have that control, and it can get a little frustrating, and especially when you're learning, so much to learn about finding these big trout, getting them to eat with these new lures, especially if you're not used to fishing with it. You wanna control what you can control, right? So that's a learning curve that in time that you'll get better at, but you don't wanna be worried and frustrated with your gear. So definitely make sure you have enough rod for these bigger baits. And so with that said, I use the Dobyns Fury. It's a 7.95, 7'9", 5 power. It's rated medium heavy, but it's geared for 1 to 5 ounce baits. That's another big old chop block on there. 7'9". It's not like a broomstick. It is heavier, much heavier than probably anything you own. But it really controls that 2 ounce bait well. And I think, I haven't thrown anything 3 ounces yet, but I think it'll handle that really well too. And it's not too much for a big trout. I still have a great fight. And, but more importantly, it controls that bait. Now, I pair that with a Daiwa Alexa 300 size bait cast reel. I want something a little bit bigger, bigger gears, more line for that bigger rod and that bigger lure. You can also use I have here on another swim bait rod rated for 1 to 2 ounce. This is actually an exception. This is a Okuma TCS. And I'll kind of put all this in the comments, the specs. Frog swim bait rod rated for 1 to 2 ounces. So smaller swim baits, but still bigger than your typically heavy action rod. I've got a Shimano Scorpion size 200 on there, right? So not quite a 300, but 200 fits the rod better and still has bigger gears and better drag for bigger baits. Shimano Scorpion can really only be bought, unless you find it on eBay somewhere or somebody owns it here in the United States, usually just bought online from Japanese tackle stores. Typically in that $200 range, you can get deals based off tariffs and taxes and things like that. But kind of like a souped up Curado, just with heavier gears, a bigger, more souped up Curado. I love it. Been throwing it for about a month now. Just really great for handling these bigger baits. Super smooth. I'll also link that. All right. So, before I go any further, I want to mention that the first category, the Berkley Chop Block 6-inch 1 ounce baits, any of your 100 to 150 size bait cast reels is fine, your 150 range. Not an issue. You don't need to go big on that. Normal size bait cast reel handles it just fine. All right. So that's the categories that I'm throwing right now. On all of these, I'm throwing 30 to 50 pound braid with an FG knot to a fluorocarbon leader. I'm using nothing less than 20 pounds. Namely, could you get away with a 17, 18 pound leader on the Berkley Chop Block 6-inch? Sure, but I don't want that risk. All these inshore fish have teeth. And then if you're fishing around structure, I want to ensure if I'm going to put the time in, and some of these days you only get 1 or 2 bites. Other days you'll get 7 or 8 bites. But when I hook into the big one, I want to make sure I get them in. And so that 20 pound plus fluoro is key in my opinion. I don't have to worry about breaking off. I can get good hook sets in, and you're not worrying about breaking off. That's the most important thing. You focus on fighting that fish and get them in. And I've had no break-offs other than when I went to war with the wrong rod. For the big 2 ounce baits, I will go, and the bigger reels, I'll go up to 25 pound fluoro. And again, you don't even notice it. That seems really thick, but when you put it on a big bait with a big rod, it does not seem that thick. All right, so that's your rod setup. Your rods, your line. Also the fluorocarbon, you may be wondering why I go fluorocarbon. I'm not going for the invisibility and other marketing stuff. I'm going because of the low stretch for good quality fluorocarbon and the abrasion resistance. It is more abrasion resistance than braid, right? Because the alternative, you can fish straight fluoro or straight mono. A lot of bass fishermen do in the trophy bass fishing world with big baits. I just have everything rigged up with braid. I like it in saltwater. I like that sensitivity, the low stretch. But as opposed to just tying straight to braid around structure, braid will cut really easy, especially on our barnacle-laden rocks and hard structure. So that's why I like that fluorocarbon. Abrasion resistance and lack of stretch. All right. Let's see here. That pretty much sums it up categorically. I've talked a little bit about the alternatives, all the rods, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to link everything in the comments, and feel free to ask questions too. I try to get to your questions as quick as possible. Sometimes the YouTube algorithm won't notify me when I get a comment, and it may get lost a little bit, but you can go into YouTube Studio and I can still find out comments that I missed, and I'll answer them in due time. I'll try to stay diligent about that. All right, so please like, follow on Facebook. share on Facebook, please. The more you share with your friends, family, fishing community, the faster I can grow. And that's ultimately why I do this. You hopefully have seen what I'm trying to do, I believe is unique. It's education heavy material. It's not shock and awe, rage, wild excitement. It's long form educational videos teaching you the basics of fishing, and then maybe some higher end, more technical stuff too. And then also along my journey inshore. So get the word out, please. If you can't share, that's all you got to do is share, talk it up. And then also on YouTube, if you can subscribe, like and subscribe, that's also important for me to help me grow. And again, we appreciate you listening. I hope this is useful, and I hope you can get out there and get some big trout. Hit me up with questions. I want to help you get there, and it's my pleasure to be able to offer some sort of, be a little, maybe a small part of that journey, you kind of getting to interact with some big trout in your near future. All right, thanks. This has been Kyle with Inshore Edge.